Class 5 English. Assalamu alaikum students. Today our lesson is from Unit 2, Does He Remember? We would be focusing on comprehension, vocabulary, punctuations and adverbs. We would be working on textbook page number 15 till 22 and workbook page number 11 till 14. Some of it we will do together in the class and some we will do it as homework. So let's begin our work. By the end of the lesson, we should be able to identify the main series of events of the story Does He Remember? Recognize the meanings of the difficult words, answer the given questions of comprehension, punctuate the given paragraph appropriately, classify given verbs and adverbs in the appropriate lists, and write a paragraph of 50 to 80 words following the given suggestions. So, let's get started. Now, look at these pictures. Yes, these are certain animals that are mostly kept as pets. Now, have you ever owned a pet? If yes, then what was it like? And what pet did you own? Do you think animals remember people? And do you think animals can recognize people with ill intentions? So I'm waiting for your answers. Let's talk about this. Before we start reading the story, let's make a guess like we always do. What do you think the story is about? Look at the title, look at the pictures on page number 15, 17 and 18 and try to guess what the picture is all about or what the story is all about. And then we'll see whether our guesses are correct or not while we're reading the story. Now, before we begin the story, let's look at some of the difficult words that we might come across. Now, first word is bay. It's a deep throat, a lengthy bark. Sometimes have you heard a little bit of a growling that is done by the dogs or animals in their throat? And that's a little bit like that. Cacophony. It's a harsh sound. Determinedly, in a decided or resolved manner. So meaning being very confident about the decision. Emitted, gave out. It might be the emission of light or it might be giving out some sound. Frantic, greatly excited, frenzied, super excited. Fumbled, touched or handled awkwardly and uncertainly. You must have heard in the cricket when somebody drops the catch, or that is what we call fumbled. Eliminated, illuminated, lit up, leash, a chain or strap attached to the collar of a dog. Muse, to consider thoughtfully. It's more like thinking. Prolonged, lengthy, drawn out, something that is being dragged on, that is prolonged, that is taking a lot of time than expected. Scrolled, written hastily or untidily. Scurry, to go with light running steps. Wrenched, pulled roughly with force. Writhed, twisted and turned. I hope you understand. Now let's read the story. Now I will be reading some part of the story and the rest of the story will be assigned to your friends by your teacher. Turn-wise, she might ask you to read the story or she might ask you to read some parts of the story on your own silently. So while all this is going on, I want you to try to find the answers of these questions that are over here. What did Mike see when he arrived at the gate? Give 2 reasons why Mike did not climb over the gate. Had Mike been to the house before and how do we know? What kind of room was Nabil sitting in? And how did Marmaduke react to Mike? And how did Mike leave the property? So these are the questions you have to find the answers of. Now listen carefully. Let's hope that you enjoy the story. Does he remember? Mike stood waiting at the garden gate. There was a padlock and a chain on the gate. It was firmly locked. On the wall beside the gate there was a large round button. Above the button there was a sign that said bell. Mike had already pressed it once, but he now pressed it again. He had not thought about climbing over the gate and entering the compound, but he knew that the large sign on the gate meant what it said. Beware of dogs. Below the lettering of this sign, someone had scrawled, "They will have you for breakfast." Mike thought this was amusing, but he also knew that it might be true. Judging by the barking he could hear from the house, he was not going to take the risk. So now the rest of the story you will read yourself. I hope you enjoy it. Now that you have read the story, I hope you enjoyed it and you were able to find the answers of these questions. Now let's check whether your answers are correct or not. What did Mike see when he arrived at the gate? Yes, Mike saw the sign, "Beware of dogs." Give 2 reasons why Mike didn't climb over the gate. Well, for one, Mike was too old, and second reason was that the sign about the dogs being there might be true. Had Mike been to the house before, and how do we know? Yes, Mike had been to the house before, and we know this how? Because he was thinking about the occasions when he had been here, and also he remembered the dogs being puppies when he came earlier. So these 2 phrases tell us that Mike had been to the house before. What kind of room was Nabil sitting in? Come on guys, tell us the answers. Yes, he was sitting in a large dark living room. How did Marmaduke react to Mike? Yes, Marmaduke reacted quite angrily. I guess he remembered something from when he was a puppy. How did Mike leave the property? He was running and leaping over the gate. That's how worried he was. Well done, guys. Let's move on to some more challenging tasks. Now that we have discussed the short question answers, now let's look at the bit lengthy question answers. Now these questions are more difficult, so we will discuss them before you actually do the work in the copy. Which words and phrases tell us that Mike was frightened of Marmaduke, and how do you think Marmaduke recognized Mike? So think about the answers of these 2 questions and I will ask you in a minute. You may pause the video here to check to prepare your answers. So let's start here. Which words and phrases tell us that Mike was frightened of Marmaduke? There are a number of words and phrases that tell us that Mike was frightened of Marmaduke. Mike made sure to keep close to the old man. We tend to stay close to someone when we are frightened, so this shows that he was frightened. Mike edged forward. That tells us that he was not moving very quickly. He was moving quite slowly, which also tells us that he was scared rather than being confident. Aghast, stopping dead in his tracks. Aghast means to be filled with terror and shock. So these all show us that he was a bit scared. There can be many other options as well. So where his hands were trembling and he was wiping the sweat off his brows. All these tell us that he was scared. So you can give your answers in your own words. There is no need to copy the answer from anywhere. Now, second question was, how did Marmaduke recognize Mike? This is again your opinion. Yes, I think Marmaduke recognized Mike by his smell. Dogs have very keen sense of smell, so that's how he was able to recognize them. So now let's come to question number 2. Now, can you be sure? Asked Mike. So to whom does Mike address this question? Well, he talks to Nabil about this. What is Mike trying to make sure of? Marmaduke does not remember how Mike used to worry him. Does the answer satisfy him? No, he asks the question again to double check. Nabil acted just in time. What made Nabil act in time? Marmaduke leaped forward in attempt to attack Mike. What did he do? He threw himself on top of the dog, pinning it firmly to the floor, slowing it down. Was his action satisfactory? Only temporarily. Marmaduke is strong and Mike later sees him at the window, so he must have gotten free from Nabil's hands. So guys, now that you know the answers of all these questions, now take out your notebooks and take 10 minutes to answer them in your notebooks. Best of luck! Now guys, after reading the passage and completing the comprehension question answers, tell me what are actually punctuations. Do you remember? Alright, now let's check and watch this video and see whether you have understood or remembered punctuations properly or not.
Hi everyone! Today we're going to talk about punctuation. Punctuation is the name for specific kinds of marks used in writing. When you are speaking, you can use pauses or stops and change your tone of voice to help the listener understand. When you are writing, you can use punctuation to do the same thing. Punctuation can help us when we read to understand what is written correctly. Let's learn about some of the more common types of punctuation. First, let's talk about periods. A period is a dot that marks the end of a sentence. Periods are the most common way to end a sentence because they are used to end any sentence that isn't a question or an exclamation. An exclamation will end with an exclamation point. Exclamation points are used to show strong feelings, like excitement, or show that something is being said loudly. Question marks are easy to understand. They belong at the end of questions. Anytime you have a question, you end it with a question mark. Got it? Commas can be used in many places. They are used to indicate a pause. Let's see some of the places a comma should be used. Commas should be used to separate 3 or more items in a list. They are also used to separate compound sentences, 2 complete sentences connected by a conjunction like and, but, and or. Commas are used after introductory words, clauses, or phrases to set them apart from the main sentence. You should also use commas to separate the name of a city from its country or state, and to set apart the day of the week or month when writing a date. Finally, commas are used to separate quotations from the rest of a sentence. A quotation is something that someone else has said or written. Quotation marks are used at the beginning and end of a sentence or phrase to show that it is being written exactly the way it was written or said originally. The last punctuation mark we are going to talk about today is the apostrophe. Apostrophes can be used in a contraction to show that there are missing letters. Apostrophes are also used to show possession, or that something belongs to someone. There are still more types of punctuation to learn about, but I hope this helped you to understand how to use basic punctuation marks. Goodbye till next time!
Now that we have understood or heard all about punctuations, now let's practice. Now, on your New Oxford English textbook, page number 20, there is an exercise C. Without looking at the story, copy paste the passage below, but put in the correct punctuation marks as you do so. When you have finished, read what you have written to see if it all makes good sense or not. Now, start working on it. Remember, do not open the book and do not play the video further because that would be cheating. Complete the work and then you can play the video and check whether your answers are correct or not. Best of luck! Now that you have completed the exercise, check whether your answers are correct. Check whether you have written appropriate capital letters, whether you have put proper speech marks and you have placed proper punctuations or not. I'll read it aloud for you so you can also check your work. Can you be sure? Asked Mike. Sure of what? Asked Nabil. That he's asleep. You can hear him snoring, can't you? No, no, whispered Mike. Are you sure that he does not remember me? Good job, guys. Now that we have completed the punctuations, let's move on to the next task. Now, guys, after finishing punctuations, let's revise another concept, that is verbs. What are verbs? These are action words that describe what the subject is doing. So here are a lot of examples of verbs for you to remind you what actually verbs are. Now that we know what verbs are, let's talk a little about adverbs. So what are adverbs? Adverbs are what describes the verbs. They add more meaning to the verb. They describe it, add more meaning, add more details about the verb. See what else we know. Let's see. What do adverbs tell? Adverbs tell us when the action happened, where the action happened, why the action happened, how the action happened, how much or how often something was done. Now let's see few examples to see whether we know how to find the adverbs. I will tell you how to find adverbs. She sang sweetly. Now come on guys, tell me, how do we find adverbs? Do you know? Yes, first of all, in any sentence, we must always look for the verb and then ask ourselves how, when, why, where such a thing happened. Answers to these questions will tell us where the adverb is. So let's see in this sentence, she sang sweetly. Where is the verb? Yes, sang is the verb. So, how did she sing? Yes, she sang sweetly. So, sweetly is the adverb. Let's look at the second sentence. He cried yesterday. Now, where is the verb in this sentence? Well done, guys. Cried is the verb. Now, how did he cry? Is that written? That's not there. When did he cry? Yesterday. Very good. So now that is our adverb. Well done. Let's move on. They played here. In this sentence, which is the verb? Well done, guys. Played is the verb here. Now let's ask ourselves, how did he play? Is it written here? No. When did they play? That's also not here. Where did they play? Oh, they played here. Yes, that is our adverb. Well done, guys. Now we know how to find adverbs in the sentence. Good job. Now, guys, let's watch this video and try to understand more about adverbs. You will find more examples of adverbs in here as well. So pay attention. I hope you enjoy this video.
An adverb is a word that describes a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Adverbs often help answer the questions how, when, where, and to what extent. Let's look at some of the different types of adverbs and learn how we use them. Many adverbs describe verbs by telling how an action happens, like quickly running, peacefully sleeping, or talking loudly. Do you notice something about these three adverbs? Oh yeah, they all end in ly. Quick, peaceful, and loud are all adjectives that can describe nouns. But when we want to describe a verb, we often add an ly on the end to create an adverb. Can you think of some other adverbs that end in ly? Adverbs can also describe when or how often something happens. These are words like now, then, tomorrow, always, never, and sometimes. We can use these words to describe verbs or adjectives, like walking now or always happy. Can you think of any other adverbs that describe when or how often something happens? Adverbs can also answer the question where. Words such as inside, outside, here, there, up, and down can be used as adverbs to tell where something happens, like look up or come here. Can you think of any other adverbs that can describe where something happens? Finally, we can use adverbs to answer to what extent. These are adverbs like barely, almost, very, and extremely. These adverbs can describe verbs like almost crying, or they can modify adjectives like extremely hot, or they can even describe other adverbs like very quickly. Can you think of some other adverbs that might answer the question to what extent? Now let's see if you can find the adverbs in the following sentence. Yesterday, we very carefully planted pretty flowers outside. Here's a hint. There are 4 adverbs in this sentence. Pause here to think, or keep watching to hear the answer. Yesterday is an adverb that tells when we planted the flowers. Carefully describes how we planted the flowers. Very describes to what extent we were careful. And outside describes where we planted the flowers. The word pretty is not an adverb. It's an adjective because it describes a noun, flowers. So how can you use adverbs in your own writing? Listen to this boring sentence. The dog wagged his tail and jumped. How can you add some adverbs to this sentence to make it more detailed and interesting? Pause here to think, or keep watching for some ideas. There are many ways you could add adverbs to this sentence. You might say the dog happily wagged his tail and jumped up and down. Or maybe the dog always wagged his tail and jumped excitedly. So remember, adverbs are words we use to describe verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. They help answer questions like how, when, where, and to what extent. You can use adverbs to make sentences more detailed and interesting.
Now that you have watched the video about adverbs, I think you have understood all that you needed to know about adverbs. So let's practice and do some exercise to figure out whether we have understood adverbs or not. Now come to your Oxford English book, page number 20, and let's complete this exercise about verbs and adverbs. Now, make a list of verbs and adverbs in the following passage and find 6 interesting verbs and 6 interesting adverbs in the chapter Does He Remember? Now question number 3, you will have different answers, so please do not copy from anywhere and pause the video here and only move forward once you have completed the task. Otherwise it would be cheating and we do not want to cheat. Best of luck! Now guys, I hope that you have completed the exercise. Now let's check your answers. Here is the list of the verbs and adverbs from the passage that is given. I hope you have done it correctly. So check your work carefully. So the verbs are came, gazed, found, written, pulls, will, be, tried, to pull, could have, move. Adverbs, wonderingly, round, beautifully, out, hard, out. I hope you were able to figure out the answers. Well done, guys. Let's move on to the next question. Now, in this question, there are a variety of answers. Now, I'll pause the video over here and you are going to tell your teacher your answers and she will tell you whether you have figured them out correctly or not. Best of luck! Now guys, now that you know everything about verbs and adverbs and how to punctuate and you have lots of vocabulary to use in your paragraph. So let's write something. Write a paragraph about Marmaduke at the window. Now you have to draw the picture of Marmaduke at the window as well. So that's totally up to you how beautifully you arrange that. Now here are some suggestions that you can write in a paragraph. What does the dog look like and how is it standing? What expression does it have on its face and why? It is strong or weak? What is it after? How does it behave? All these points you can add in the paragraph and you can take help of these points as well while you're making the picture. Now they should both logically link. It should not be so that your paragraph is telling that the expression on Marmaduke's face was that of anger and you draw Marmaduke's picture with a smile on his face. So be careful, guys. I hope you enjoy this activity. Take 20 minutes to complete the paragraph. I'll wait for you. Now, while you're writing this paragraph, remember your paragraph is only going to be good enough if it has the following things. It should be one paragraph, about 50 to 80 words. It should have 5 to 6 adjectives at least. It should have clear description of the dog and it should be logical. So you have 20 minutes to complete the task. Now guys, here is your homework. Some of it needs to be done on the notebook. Some of it can be done on the textbook. Also, some of it is just listening and speaking and you can do that at home with the help of your family or your cousins. Now, best of luck and submit your work on time as your teacher tells you to do so. Now, before we sign off, let's wrap up the lesson. Now, wrapping up the lesson is very important. Why? Because this is how we figure out whether we understood the day's lesson or not. This is the point where you tell your teacher if something is not clear, so she can give you more examples or she can replay the video for you. Now, what happens in the story? Does he remember? How do we punctuate a sentence and what are verbs and what are adverbs? So, tell your teacher. Have a great day.